Hi there, my name is Amy Barkley, and today we're going to talk about something that is going to be popping up on a lot of farms and homesteads across the region, especially as we head into the colder months of January, February, and March. Winter hasn't been too cold yet, we've been very fortunate, but in most winters we are going to have very low temperatures, and a lot of folks will be using heat lamps. So today we're going to talk about heat lamp safety on the farm. Now, why do we use heat lamps? A lot of livestock producers are going to be using them, and they're using them on animals that are not otherwise able to regulate their own body temperatures. This can include young poultry, newly farrowed piglets, lambs, or kids, um, generally for a couple of weeks until those animals are able to regulate their body heat on their own. There also may be circumstances where we have animals that are otherwise old enough to regulate their body temperatures against the cold, but have lost their parents for whatever reason. And those orphaned animals may need supplemental heat so that they can perform as well as they can to get their body weight up to get acclimated to the temperatures. There are some instances where sick and injured animals may need supplemental heat as well. Sometimes these animals have lost hair or an illness or surgery, something that depresses their immune system, where they're not as readily able to regulate their body temperature. So for these reasons, we use heat lamps. Now, heat lamps should be used judiciously, and that's because every year there are many reports of barn fires. They can be caused by heat lamps that are installed properly, but the animals knock them down, knock into them, or perhaps they're not installed properly. And through this presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about the specs of a heat lamp, what makes them safe, and how to make sure that they are situated in your barn or coop such that they are going to provide the least risk possible. Now, before I jump into three different types of heat lamps and their general safeties, I'm going to talk through one of the more common heat lamp types. So if you'll bear with me for a second. Okay, I'm going to show you one of the heat lamps. So this heat lamp is one purchased from a farm supply store. It's about $10 for the heat lamp, so pretty cheap. And then the bulb inside is about another $7 or so, depending on where you get it and what color scheme you get and that sort of thing. So I'm going to point you to a couple different features on this heat lamp and what makes it safe and what really doesn't make it safe. So first, we're going to talk about the cord. So the cord for these heat lamps should be pretty thick. Grounded if possible, if not, that's okay. But these heat lamps should have a thick cord, and that prevents them from being damaged. And it also helps with making sure that the electricity flow into the lamp is appropriate for the bulb that you've got in there. Usually these lamps are rated for a specific wattage of bulb, so just make sure when you're picking up bulbs for the lamp that you're picking up ones that are appropriate. Where this cord attaches to the base of the lamp right here, it's got a fire retardant coating, which is really nice. I think this is just like a slip right here, but it helps prevent melting of the cord from heat that may build up here in the porcelain base of the lamp, and it helps prevent against some of the wear and tear that happens when lamps are going to be knocked back and forth by livestock inadvertently or by you inadvertently. So that's an extra safety there. This particular heat lamp has two ways to affix it to a chain. Typically, you want to keep these about 24 inches away from anything flammable, so hanging them from a chain that's attached to the wall or to a pen is your best bet. And this one has a clip here that you can open. It's pretty stiff, and attach it to things. But this by itself isn't great because it can slip from a surface if it's attached. So there is a secondary attachment here, and this is made of metal. And this is great to clip a carabiner to and then clip it to a chain, which is then attached to a permanent affixation on the wall, like a nail or a screw or a hook that is really sturdy in the wall or ceiling. So those are those. And then the next piece I want to point you to is the base itself. So the base of heat lamps, because we're running such a high wattage bulb in them, should always be porcelain. You can tell, you can run your finger along it and it kind of feels and sounds like rock. You don't want these to ever be plastic. Plastic bases are not appropriate for the wattage bulbs that we're using. So make sure that these are ceramic. What I don't like about this lamp here, that keeps jumping back, let me move this a little bit. What I don't like about this particular lamp is that this base is not securely affixed to the hood of the lamp. You can see that there's actually a lot of slop and play in there. And while there's fire retardant rings in here to help keep things spaced and safe, ideally this really should be affixed firmly to the base. That's going to be your most safe bet in terms of heat lamps. But this one's a little wiggly, and that's not great. So if an animal happens to bump into this, it can really damage the lamp. But if this base and hood slip apart too much, it may also lean the hood directly against the light bulb. And then if you hit this again, it could crack the light bulb, and that could be a problem. The aluminum hood on this is good. Again, if it is plastic, make sure it's rated for the application of using a hot light bulb in here. And this particular lamp has a protector on it, and this protector is actually really good quality. Normally protectors are just, on these particular lamps, if they even have one, are just 2 lines of the metal wiring. This one has 6, and then it has some extra security in here. So if this lamp drops onto bedding material or runs up against an animal, it's not going to touch, well, it's not going to have as much potential to touch the bulb as it would if this lamp didn't have a hood, or if this hood was less complex. We'll put it that way. But even with this hood, it still doesn't protect from if the bulb shatters, from the bulb fragments getting everywhere. I don't think there's a heat lamp that does prevent that from happening. And it also doesn't necessarily protect things if this falls into the bedding, and bedding ends up coming into the lamp itself, like pieces of straw poke in or shavings go in there. That could result in the risk of potential fire. Another thing about this heat lamp that makes it a little less secure, especially for animals with horns, so mama goats, for instance, if you're putting the light on babies, is that they can get their horns hooked in here, and they could whip this heat lamp around. So those are just some things to consider when we look at the anatomy of the heat lamp and potential safeties. So at this point, I'm going to pull up the presentation again. Okay. Jump to where we were. Okay, so I've kind of just talked you through the light bulb type on the left, or sorry, the lamp type on the left-hand side. Now the lamp that I showed you is a little more secure, well, actually a lot more secure than this lamp over here. This particular lamp has only the 2 wires running across and crisscross. It has a shallower base, and it looks like the cord is skinnier, and it doesn't have a hook assembly. So in terms of heat lamps, this is your least safe. What I showed you is kind of the next step up. The middle one, it provides some added advantages where everything is self-contained. Things are more secure in terms of the base because that's all inside and connected. And there's a longer distance between the bulb and the outside of the lamp. So if it falls, there's less of a chance of things getting in there and starting fires. Now, the type on the right is the most safe. And that's because not only does it have everything permanently affixed, but it also has a very secure cover covering the whole of the lamp. So if critters get an appendage in there, it's not going to knock the lamp down. And it looks like it has a pretty sturdy base up here. So this is the most safe option here on the right, and then the least safe is on the left. Now, when we install heat lamps, there's a couple of things that we can do to ensure that they're safely as installed as possible. In this particular image, the lamp is only about 20 inches off the ground. It should be a couple more, should be about 24. And you can see here that this is the lamp that I just showed you, that it's hooked with a carabiner clip here. And then I also attached the lamp base, that clamp base, to the chain as well. The chain is attached to a hook that's secured in the ceiling with a weight rating of like 150 pounds, which is definitely overkill. But I know that it's not gonna lose the chain. And then this is my farm. I keep these heat lamps in here until the chicks don't need them anymore. And as soon as they don't need them, I pull them right out. That helps really keep the larger animals from bumping into them and from causing them to fall. I also check them regularly. There's fire alarms installed in here, and we have a fire extinguisher in here, which I'll get into in a second, as added precautions. So Keep heat lamps about 24 inches from any flammable surfaces, regardless of the type of heat lamp that you're using. And make sure that it's securely fastened to a wall or to the ceiling, or if you've got individual pens with steel that's separating them, that it's attached to that. If you wrap the cord around where you're attaching it as an added precaution, that also helps. Keep lamps out of reach of livestock. Adult animals don't need heat lamps, so keeping them away from adults is a safety precaution right there. And if you can, keep them as far away from the babies as you can, or the injured animals or what have you, while still allowing them to take advantage of the heat that you're providing. Avoid the use of extension cords. The more connections that you have from your lamp to the wall, the larger of a chance you have of something going wrong. If you can, plug a heat lamp directly into the wall. They do sell heat lamps with longer cords. I was just looking at a heat lamp that had a 16-foot cord, which is really, really long, but that's good because it eliminates the use of an extension cord in some buildings where you might not have an outlet readily available. And then finally, when you're plugging in heat lamps, make sure that they're plugged into a circuit with a working breaker. You want to make sure that if there is something going on with that heat lamp, that instead of power going to that heat lamp and providing that energy, that line is cut. So usually when something goes wrong with the heat lamp, it'll flip the breaker. Make sure that everything's working for added safety. Now, additional safety measures that I alluded to a little bit earlier, fire alarms, they're great. Stick 1 or 2 in an area where you're using heat lamps, but make sure that they're really loud so that you can hear them, or you can get the kind that will send an alert to your phone if there's something wrong. This can give you a leg up if a heat lamp does fall or is damaged so that you can get to a fire and put it out as soon as possible. To that end, a fire extinguisher or 2 should also be in every barn or facility where heat lamps are being used. For the type, you want a commercial grade, 5 to 10 pound, and then you also want to make sure it's ABC certified. Now that certification means that it will cover fires from flammable materials like wooden bedding, from materials like herbicides or other chemicals, and then also from electricity. So this fire extinguisher will cover all kinds of fires and should put out your fire readily. Also, make sure you know how to use a fire extinguisher. You want to make sure that if there's an emergency, you know exactly what to do so that you can save precious seconds. And the final safety measure is to have a contact list. So especially if you have other people working on your farm, maybe somebody's watching your animals for you while you're away, or perhaps you have employees on your farm, you want to make sure you have a list of contacts of who to let know that something has happened. That could be farm managers, that could be members of the family. That should also include your emergency contacts, your local fire department, your local police department. And you should also have a plan in place of how those emergency personnel are going to get onto your farm. If you have a certain road that should be taken in, maybe you should call the local authorities and let them know, hey, I have a farm, here's where it is. If I ever have a problem, here's the best way to get on it. Not only does that give you a good connection with your emergency responders, but it also allows them to work most efficiently should something take place. And that's all I've got for you for today. So with these steps, you can really help make sure that heat lamps are safe on your farm. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat below, and I would be happy to answer them. All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a good night.